The Fujicast is an independent Loading Zone production.
My grandma used to have lots of sayings. Things like, can't, never, could, and don't look a gift horse in the mouth. And right now, up to the end of July, if she was a friend of the Fujicast, like you are, she'd have been bowled over to receive 10% off all workshops, mentoring and presets, and actually anything else available on kevinmullinsworkshops.co.uk, which makes me think he might have sneaked in Git the dog for sale. Just use the word Fujicast upon checkout and enjoy 10% off at kevinmullinsworkshops.co.uk. And Git, I think you're safe, really. Do you remember, Kev, when we used to start up every single episode with, what's happened to you this week? And you'd say, oh, well, I've been off to Sweden, then I had to fly into Germany, I did a training course in Holland, popped across to Japan because I just wanted a quick chat about the new X100. And then I was back home in T, and then I had to pop off to Atlanta. Couldn't believe it for a quick little meeting.
No, that's not true. I've never been to Atlanta.
Oh, okay. All the other places you've been to. So what have you done in the last week?
Nothing. I'm just looking back through my diary, actually, and it's basically empty.
Is it?
No event. Portfolio review. No event.
Well, portfolio reviews, these must be the best portfolio reviews you've ever done. If you're thinking about having a portfolio review done, this is the best time in the world for Kev.
I've really enjoyed it, actually. I have to say, I've had some kind of...
Some corkers?
I've had some incredible stuff, yeah, absolutely. But from all kinds of genres. I've been like a landscape photographer, and I've done birth photographer. Wow. A lot of weddings.
Well,
course,
you know about the actually, let me come back to this.
The Fujicast.
Hello, welcome to the Fujicast. Yes, for the second week in a row now, Kev is here.
Hello.
Yes, 2 meters distance. We have measured it. Using Kev's roughly 2 meters long body.
I just lie on the ground between us.
Sorry, going back, we'll come back to what's on the show today in a moment. But going back to doing these reviews, then. So if you're doing a portfolio review for a landscape photographer, does that feel comfortable?
Well, I did explain to him beforehand that I'm not a landscape photographer, but what I can do is talk to you about light composition moment, all of that kind of stuff, and then we dig into using the different kind of crop overlays in Lightroom and various things like that. So yeah, it wasn't so much a case of what I can teach him about landscape, but about critiquing I can do, and the tips and tricks and stuff.
Do a lot of the reviews turn into sort of as much a technical sort of opportunity to train, or
not really? No, okay. Because there's some people have gone for the portfolio review and the Lightroom workflow thing as well separately.
So together. So
yeah, although not too many, but yeah, so it's two separate things. It's an hour and a half of me talking about the pictures, and often we're doing it as a to figure out the ones for their websites or for their portfolios and stuff like that.
So there's a good opportunity, really, if you're building a website, to really find out more about what should be going on there. Well, I should get you to do mine. Yeah,
I won't charge you. Not much.
I saw that look in your eye there. Welcome to the Fujicast. If you've emailed before, thank you. You are officially what we know as a friend of the show. Your questions mean, they're the lifeblood of the show, of course. Click at fujicast.co.uk is the address to send them to. Thank you very much for sending them in. We're going to go to Club Indulgence for a visit through your the lovely things that you've been saying on the podcast reviews that you've been leaving. There's Kev's Book of the Week. What's the Book of the Week this week, Kev?
This week
do you remember Jimmy Young? What's the recipe today, Jim?
This week?
No?
Yeah, I do remember.
You do remember?
Yeah, vaguely. This week we've got Martin Parr, and In Wales book.
Right.
Another signed book.
Yeah. Although the last week when I'd signed the book, devalued it. Martin Parr signing it, on the other hand, puts massive value into it. If your name is Kevin.
Do you remember the X-Weddings conference, and good old Ben Gillet filmed it for us?
Ben Gillet, yeah.
Well, he sent me through the files during lockdown.
Yes.
And because there's so many of them, so big, it came on a hard drive.
Yes.
And he included an X-Weddings mug, one of our mugs that we had done, and it was signed by Martin Parr. It said, to Kevin,
no way,
love from Martin Parr or something.
He'd got Martin Parr to sign his mug.
Yeah, because he works with Martin, I think, at the some kind of photo
in Bristol
library type thing.
He does. Yeah.
So and that was nice.
Good heavens.
Yeah, I think I've got more signatures with Martin Parr than he's got himself.
Funnily enough, in the back over here, in my glass cabinet, my brother-in-law got me a signed a signed postcard from Martin Parr,
I got one of them as well.
but he signed it to the wrong name.
Oh,
So, officially speaking, I don't have an officially signed one to me. I do have an officially signed one to a chap called Mark. So there we go. Right, let's kick off with the questions. You can go first.
all right. This is from Andy Stonia. Now, Andy, you and I have got a bone to pick with each other by the looks of it. A question about names for Kevin. He puts a little thing. He says, preamble, I have a great surname, Stonia, which is Anglo-Saxon, meaning stonecutter.
Right.
But my parents named me Andrew. It was going to be Gary.
Gary's all right.
Gary.
Although I do think of Gary the Snail in SpongeBob.
I always think when I hear the name Gary, I always think it was Gary the illegal immigrant in Only Fools and Horses.
All right, I don't remember that.
Gary.
Gary?
Yeah, you must remember that episode when they go to France to and they end up coming back in the truck full of beer, and in the back of the truck when they get there is Gary, who's the son of the owner of the the beer shop.
Okay.
Gary. Anyway, sorry, Andy.
I'm sorry to Gary's, by the way, if you're
yes,
offended by that.
yeah. I've called myself Andy as slightly friendlier.
Yeah.
But it's still a bit me.
Is it?
This is his words, not my words.
It's cool.
And not very arty or wedding photographer sounding.
Right. Well, what's a wedding photographer supposed to sound like?
I called my eldest son Max, which makes for a much better name.
Strong, isn't it, Max?
Max Stonia.
Max, yeah.
You can see that on the cover of a DVD, can't you?
You can. Yeah.
Max Stonia takes on the world.
Yeah.
So, question, Kevin.
Yeah.
Are you happy with being called Kevin?
Oh, no. Oh, don't pick on Kev like this. You'll upset him.
Would you change your name if you could? Actually, my surname Mullins is Irish, and it means potato picker.
Does it?
Yeah.
What Mullins is?
Kevin Potato Picker in the olden days.
You want to get a Mullins in?
Yeah. So no, I a couple of weeks ago I did that Fuji film webinar. And one of the things I said on there, as I've said on here many times, is you've all got such cool names. I'm called Kevin.
Yes.
And
you have.
As I was about 2 minutes later, I'm still in the middle of the webinar. My mum message popped up from my mum on the phone.
Oh no!
I think your name is wonderful.
Oh dear!
X.
Oh dear! Because we sometimes forget that your mum listens to. Hello, mum.
Yes.
Your mum listens to this show, doesn't she?
My mum, bless her, hasn't been out of their house in months.
No.
I'm all right with Kevin. I don't mind it. It's a little bit, it had the connotation. When I was growing up, we had Kevin the Gerbil and
of course.
Kevin and what are they called? Kevin and Perry, and it was very, people called Kevin worked in supermarket checkouts kind of thing. Nothing wrong with that.
No,
quite happy with the job doing that right now. So yeah, I'm all right. But I really wish that my parents, because we are Welsh, had spelt it the Welsh name, which is Cefyn.
Considering that a lot of your clients come from America, particularly the ones you talk to online, they'd be truly confused by it.
Well, anyway.
And so would I, living in England.
I am called Kevin with pointy K's, and I have pointy eyebrows to go with my K's. And the Kevin and K and M of Kevin Mullins is the most nightmarish thing you could do in a logo.
Is it?
Because it's all angles and straight lines and anger and aggressiveness and stuff. So I totally understand what you're on about, Andy. Although from now on, Andy, I'm going to call you Gary. That email was from Gary Stonia.
Neil James, as you well know, is not my real name, but you've only made me think of it because you were talking about the artwork. Originally, it was when the name was invented for me, practically, because of a BBC thing. Then it was originally really Neil, Neil James, but I don't really like the name Neil. Neil, it's like yoga. Neil, I don't. It's never been and also there was a bully at school called Neil. I won't say his surname. But I've never been able to get over the name because of him.
I know.
I have a real problem with it.
It's really funny how name association can do that.
This is years ago. This wasn't even a secondary school bully. This was a primary school bully.
I have a similar thing with the name Catherine.
Do you?
Yeah, and now Catherine is a beautiful name.
Yes, it is.
And there's going to be a lot of Catherines, obviously, because we now have a beautiful princess called Catherine.
Yes, of course.
And however, I used to sit next to a little girl in school who used to wet herself all the time called Catherine.
All right.
And it just associates in my mind.
That Catherine.
I just think of
poor Catherine.
we.
Oh, well, I hope you helped her. Well, I mean, in terms, where are we going with this, Mullins? This could be tricky. But in terms of just, offering support, because people they need support that age.
Yeah.
Should we move on, briskly?
Yeah, I think we should quickly.
Yeah. We got some emails from over the period when we were doing the Daily Show. We did something called Tech Free Tuesday, which I did notice that one of the we had we didn't actually have complaints about it as such, but there were a couple of reviews that didn't like that part of the show, part of the week so much. But I tell you what, you try doing 7 days in a week and coming up with new material all the time. But we are left over with quite a few interesting ones. Paul Clowden had sent in some questions. In fact, a long list of the questions. Do you want? Let me run through some here, Kev. And then we'll go back to a photography question. What's your favourite moment in history? I just know what he's going to say. I know it immediately.
Mine would be the death of Henry VIII.
And I knew you were going to say that. If you had a time machine, would you rather go back in time or into the future? You're going straight back to Henry VIII, aren't you?
I am. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there photographing the last 2 days of his life.
What is it about Henry VIII?
No, I'm just fascinated with him. And I always say about the death, because I just think that would probably be, when people say the moment in time, but I'd rather say that than like the beheading of one of the wives or something. But no, generally, I'd like to have been the photo documenter of Henry VIII. Yeah, that'd been cool. He was a bit of a git.
Yeah, he wasn't. Yeah, he had his moments. That's certainly true. What is an irrational fear you had as a child? Not of a child, but as a child.
Plenty of irrational fears as a child.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've got irrational fears now, like toads and frogs. Ooh.
Yeah, I never got the toad one. Because when Gemma said to me, ask him about toads, I thought, what? Kev's afraid of a toad? What's to be afraid of?
No,
really?
Toads and frogs, yeah. I had one in my bag once on the tube. It was terrible.
You had a toad in your bag in a tube? How on earth did that happen?
Well, my laptop, when I used to be going back and forth London, my laptop was in the living room and we'd had a barbecue on the Sunday, and presumably a toad had come in from the garden.
Right, and leapt in your laptop
went
bag?
In my laptop bag, because it was probably a bit cooler on top of the metal.
Of that.
And there I am in the tube, put my hand in my bag, and there's a great big frigging giant frog.
Was it still alive?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Can you believe that?
Yeah, yes, I can quite believe it.
It can only ever happen to you.
Yeah.
What about spiders and stuff like that? They're the irrational fears. I don't know if they're even so irrational. I mean, they're the fears I had as a kid, was spiders, really.
When I was a kid, there's two things that I remember.
Earthworms as well.
I remember two things quite substantially that affected me. One of them was watching Jaws.
Oh, yes.
And then I really struggled to go to the loo for a very long time in case a shark come up and bit me on the bum. And which is totally unfair to sharks, because they've had a bit of a battering from that film.
Well, obviously, in the last couple of weeks, there was dreadful news in Australia, of course.
Well, there was, I know, but did you see the irony of it? Was the day before there was a big long read on BBC about why sharks have been given a bad name by the film Jaws,
right?
Great whites, specifically, and there was a lovely line in it where it said, one thing is for sure: sharks never jump out to the sea and roar like a lion.
What's strange?
Well, because that's what it does in Jaws. He climbs up on the boat and goes.
Yeah. That's when he says you're going to need a bigger boat, isn't it?
We're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah.
And then the next day, somebody did get it.
They did
by a shark.
Yeah. Would you be very careful about swimming in the sea in Australia?
Yes.
Would you go at all?
Yeah, I'd go in up to my knees. Yeah, no, absolutely. I even though I know the odds and stuff are.
See, I know. Ridiculous. I thought this. We were up in the north, and we were paddling, and a local said, "What are you doing?" I thought paddling. This is a beach that has crocs. I was like, right, okay. So not say no. You shouldn't go far in, and you shouldn't be shallow either.
Oh,
you best get out
further out.
No, out the sea. Out the sea.
Oh yeah.
And I felt a bit weird actually. Snorkeling just off the Great Barrier, because although it's all beautiful, there are some deep bits. It's not just all shallow.
No, and
I always look down and think, I wonder what's down there.
Yeah, no.
What's in the dark?
That's not something I would be particularly comfortable with.
No,
I have to say, no,
not for you. What did you want to be? Last one. What did you want to be when you were a kid?
Astronaut. A journalist.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I wanted to be a newspaper journalist.
Effectively become that as a photojournalist, and in some respects, I suppose.
I wanted to be a journalist, or I wanted to be in a boy band.
A boy band.
Kevin and the Mullets.
Kevin and the Mullets. Oh my God. Okay, your question.
I have a question from Tim. Quite a long one. He says, and actually, Tim is in Adelaide, in Australia, on the other side of the globe. As
Have you ever been to Australia?
No, I know this one has been asked before, but it needs to be re-asked.
Okay.
This is more of a plea than a question. I'm sure Fujifilm execs are listening.
Yes.
Maybe. Is there some way that we can appeal to Fujifilm to make an X70 upgrade? An X80. We mentioned this last week.
Didn't this get asked on Ask Andreas as well? I think
Possibly.
It might have done, yeah.
And he goes on to say, I'm a long-time user of the Ricoh GR series. I think they've just bought a new one out, actually, GR3 or
They
something.
have, yeah. I don't understand
But
that.
they all lack a tilt LCD, and like the X70 has. An X80 with an X-Trans and all the current Fujifilm simulations would be the reason in itself for me to have one. Sorry, Fuji, but the XF10 does not quite cut the mustard, as they say.
Oh dear.
I'm in line for an X100V as a companion, but I really think there is room for a 28mm equivalent fixed lens pocketable APS-C X80. How do we get an X80 request back to Fujifilm from them to say, we shall consider?
What do you think?
There is nobody shouting as loud as me about an X70 upgrade. I adore that camera. I mean, it had its little quibbles, but it's a brilliant camera. And I think part of the problem with the X70 was that it was launched the same day as the X Pro 2. And it kind of came under the radar, so not many people saw it.
No, I didn't. I didn't even recall its launch.
Well, I was involved in the X Pro 2 launch, and I had no idea about an X70, and I didn't even notice it being launched. And so the X Pro 2 came along, and the X70 also didn't sell particularly well because it was tiny. It's a tiny thing, very powerful, tiny thing, but quite expensive. So what happens? That kind of camera is the kind of thing you'd see on the stores in, like John Lewis or something. So people go in and they think, oh, that one's £800. The Canon, whatever, Ixus or something, is £400. I'll have that one. So it didn't sell very well. And then I think the earthquake happened, and all of the sensors fell into the sea, which doesn't help in Japan.
Yes.
And I think since then it's become a very, very popular camera. But because there's not that many of them made, they're very hard to get hold of, and they don't make them anymore, of course. So yeah, I mean, I have been pulling that chain as much as I possibly
If they
can.
were really popular, why do you think they? Do you think maybe they associate bad luck with it, with all the things that happen? Because I know that
I don't know. I honestly think it's one of those.
it wasn't the luckiest camera.
The thing is, you and I and Tim are in the street photography circle, right? Now, street photography is, people go, yeah, the X70, brilliant, blah, 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 blah. But, with all due respect to street photographers, we're probably not the ones that they want to market cameras to. Market cameras to a much wider range than just street photographers, because how many of them, street photographers are notoriously hold on to their cameras, gears gets battered, no need to buy a new one. It's not about the gear, it's all about what you do with your eyes and everything. So it probably just doesn't sell much, and that's as good as it is. It's a very niche kind of thing. The XF10 that he mentioned is it's, I suppose, it was never meant to replace the X70. It wasn't an upgrade to the X70. Curiously named the XF10, I thought, because actually that's the same name in nomenclature as the lenses. So when they first announced an XF10, I thought, oh, what's that, a 10mm lens? Anyway, that came along. Quite a nice little camera. Very, very cheap and very small. Cheaper than a phone.
Do they hold their
smaller
value
than a
now,
phone.
do they?
Well, the XF10s or the X70s?
X70s.
X70s, yeah. They are actually do hold their value.
The XF10.
XF10 you can still buy.
Yes.
It's still retail. So X70, X80, who knows? I would also like it. I've tried. The fact is, it's been a long time, and there has, as far as I can tell, been no mention of it. So I can't imagine it's on their we shall consider list. But I don't know. Who knows? Not me.
Interesting, these cameras that become. Well, I suppose the X70 now has got that value because it's a rare camera, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was reading about a camera. Have you ever heard of? Let me look on the screen here. It was a sort of camera many years ago. A manufacturer called Petri. Have you ever heard of Petri? Petri.
Didn't they make dishes?
I wonder whether you might say that. It was a camera used by a photographer called Malcolm Brown. We talked about this actually on the Photography Daily podcast that I do about protest photography. And Malcolm Brown was the photographer that took the picture of the burning monk.
Yes. Yeah.
And he used a Petri. Now, but I'd not heard of a Petri before, and I thought, I'm going to look this up online. And they're worth a fortune now. I mean, you can buy some cheap ones, but if you want to buy a nice Petri, the type that Malcolm Brown used that day when he was making those particular photographs.
And that was in the
about
80s.
350 quid. No, it's 57 years ago, that.
No way.
It is, yeah.
Oh, well, then I can't possibly remember it happening.
Well, no, you'll know the picture.
Oh, I know the picture. Maybe that's where I got confused.
Yeah.
So this is, what is it, medium format? Plate camera?
35 mil.
35 mil.
You know, the incredible thing about that story, when they needed to get that picture out of Saigon, they trusted a pigeon to take it to Manila.
Wow.
One of the world's most famous horrific pictures.
Yeah.
One of the world's most, I mean, that's incredible, the lengths that people used to get to take stuff out of the country. But so it's interesting, isn't it, how cameras become very, very valuable.
I've never heard of it. I need to look that up.
Petri. Petri. And they cost an absolute... Well, they cost an absolute fortune now.
If you get a
really, really good one. Well, the irony was, it was a very cheap camera at the time. That's why a lot of people were using them. Right, let's step into club indulgence before we have this week's interview. Have you got some there, Kev? I rather stepped into it and didn't warn you it was coming up. So thank you very much for the wonderful comments that you've been making, the reviews that you've been leaving in the podcast apps. It is very, very much appreciated, and it does so much for the show, because it means that, well, I think it sort of raises our profile a bit on the radar, doesn't it, sometimes?
Yeah.
This one is from Lars Heggard. Why would a podcast called The Fujicast, run by two wedding photographers, be a show for you? Honesty is an essential part of the show, and there's room for all denominations. Why would a podcast called The Fujicast, run by two wedding photographers, end up being your favourite? Well, if you appreciate tech talk to a certain extent, interviews that bring you inspiration, and sometimes the urge to break the bonds of your everyday life, this one is for you. He did say a lot more, and he was very, very kind as well. So thank you. 5 stars from Mr. Heggard.
This one's from Steve Lynham. He says, what can I say? The shows are just wonderful. The in-depth knowledge is unbelievable.
How does he spell that?
Yeah. The in-depth knowledge is
interesting.
Unbeatable. And the on-air humour has me laughing out loud.
Does it?
That's lol.
Lol.
You've both been a daily treat to listen to, and I'm now going to have to do my ridiculously daily exercise schedule without your input. How could you put me through that? Seriously, you both deserve a break. I send you my heartfelt thanks for what you've done. Cheers, Steve Lynham.
Sounds like a Friends edition. We were on a break. We're not on a break anymore.
No, we're back. Back with a bang.
Yes. Great podcast, guys. Love the easy way that you gel together in the current times of lockdown, which are easing. The Daily Show is part of the obligatory routine to keep sanity within reach, but just out of earshot. From David Mullen, thank you.
This is from KJ Martin 88.
Nice.
A great show about so much more than photography, full of insights, great interviews and feedback. Kevin and Neil have both built a rather special thing here, sharing their lives in these difficult times with the community that has grown around the podcast.
English Steve, 65. Do you think he was born in 65?
And he's English.
And he's called Steve?
Yeah.
Maybe. Fujicast is not just for users of Fuji cameras. Anyone with an interest in photography can gain so much by listening to Kevin and Neil. Their easy charm and love for what they do comes through loud and clear. That's it. That's remember, if you've sent in one of these lovely reviews, what we always say about you...
You're our favourite listener, and we mean it.
Absolutely true. Right, time for this week's interview. Today, proof that you need look no further than your front door for a good photo story, Kev. Jim Grover has discovered that keeping your ear close to the ground locally can feed you a diet of strong narrative-rich projects. I talked with Jim and played a shorter excerpt on Photography Daily a couple of weeks back as he prepared to lead a series of online webinars for the Leica Academy on making documentary pictures. Today, a chance to hear far more about the projects he's been working on locally and how to take those pictures and make them into local exhibitions, something we've been talking about recently on this show, funnily enough, using wall space locally to promote your photography. Jim, I know in your biography you talk about making the unseen seen. Which part of community is not being seen?
Great question. So my passion, as you say, is to try and discover things that haven't been seen before, partly because most things have been photographed, by someone at some point in time. And if you want to capture the attention of viewers in a world that is full of photography, you need to find things that haven't been done before. So, for example, my first project a few years back now, I spent a year with our vicar in Clapham, because I knew that had not been photographed before. And so bringing to life what it means to be a vicar in the Church of England, beyond the things we all understand, like Sunday services, weddings and funerals, that brought to life, if you like, and made seen, his sort of 24/7 life that is not typically understood. And then more recently, I decided to spend the best part of a year with the Windrush generation here in South London, because again, I know that a lot of people have no idea that there was this wonderful community of people living their lives, kind of true to their traditions, of sort of 9 nights, dominoes, calypso music. They are living that life in South London, unknown by most people who live around them, and they're holding on to those precious traditions that have kind of been part of their lives for 70, 80, 90 years. So it's those sorts of things. I'm a real believer that if you look hard enough, you will find things on your doorstep that are there to be discovered that either most people or just about no one actually fully appreciates and understands. I had no idea there was a Dominoes club in Clapham, where basically Caribbean men, typically in their 60s and 70s, meet 3 nights a week to play dominoes. I had no idea. Yeah, I've lived in Clapham for 30 years, and most people had no idea about that until I revealed it to them.
Have they admitted you as an honorary member?
They have. I've become sort of an honorary member of various Caribbean communities. I've learned how to make curry goat. I get in, which is amazing, delicious, rice and peas. I get invited to Jamaican funerals. Yeah. I'm very much accepted by that kind of community now. Partly because I have shone a light on something rather beautiful, and I've celebrated their lives and recognised their kind of contributions in their lives in an admiring way, because I admire that community, what they've brought to us, what they've given to us, how they are leading their lives, their values. And so, the fact that I, if you like, am a supportive photographer of those sorts of communities obviously makes it easier for me to become part of it. Of the community.
See, I'm listening to you thinking, well, Jim leads the idyllic lifestyle. As a fellow photographer, I'm thinking, well, I'm sure I could look around on my doorstep or from my doorstep and find stories. I know I could. There, as you say, there are always stories. But there's a chasm, you see. There's a difference between you and I, in that you're able to then turn those stories into your job.
Okay, well, the answer to that is that's extremely difficult. But let me just wind back a little bit to the first part of your question, because actually, when I was doing I've now done 4 major projects in 5 years. Yeah. And when I started out, I was still working. And so I was finding a way to do these around my work life. So, for example, take spending a year with my vicar, he would say to me, I'd say to him, what are you up to next week, Kit? And he might say, actually, I'm visiting, Doris in hospital on Thursday. I said, okay, I'll come back. What time is it? Let me see if I can juggle my diary to join you doing that. Actually, you could find some projects. I could have done the Dominoes project because they meet every evening. And so if you're willing to spend your evenings, documenting for Dominoes in Clapham, you could do that. So I don't think one should assume that it's not possible to combine documentary photography with a working life. But of course, you've got to choose projects that you can fit around that. And that's why I always choose projects that are in Clapham, on my doorstep. So I know I can literally, when I've got a spare moment, I can pick it up effortlessly. Of course, in the day of digital imagery, there is no cost attached to, if you like, processing what you take, or the only cost is your time. Yeah. If you then want to basically stage an exhibition, which is what I tend to do, those do cost money. And the only way to recover the cost of those sorts of ventures is to basically, firstly, attempt to get the story covered by the media on an exclusive basis, in which case you will earn a fee. And secondly, many of my exhibitions have been re-exhibited, and therefore now, if someone wants to exhibit my exhibition, I will charge them a fee to do that in an attempt to recover all the costs incurred in basically staging the exhibition first time round. But I've chosen to do things that cost money, like stage exhibitions. You could easily self-publish, your work in a book or a magazine.
Yep.
There's a format called Blurb I happen to use, which, doesn't cost a lot of money because you can sell the work. Similarly, you can sell prints, so it depends what you want to do with the work ultimately. My mindset has always been, if I'm going to spend a year, let's say, on a project, and I want to bring to life things that haven't been seen before and celebrate them, my mindset is always to, how do I get to stage an exhibition? That's my mindset.
Where did the fascination for these stories come from?
Well, I think I've always loved taking photos. That's always been part of my life, all the way back to my school days.
Yes.
But I think there's the transition you make from taking what I would call individual images. That's a very different thing from deciding to really immerse yourself in a single story, to spend time with it, to get to know the characters, to kind of explore all the different strands of it. Often the story ends up being different from what you expect. So for example, on the Windrush story, how did that come about? That came about because one of my fellow church congregants is West Indian. And he said to me, Jim, because I'm always saying to people, what are you up to? Any ideas for stories? I'm always asking people, what about their lives. And He said, Jim, well, I play dominoes each week. I said, what? He said, yeah, I play dominoes. Come along. So I went into that dominoes with no bigger intention than just seeing if there was a story to be told about Caribbean men playing dominoes in Clapham. That's where it started. At that point, shame on me, I'd never heard of Windrush. Shame on me. Shocking confession. Right. Shame on me.
Yeah.
But as I spent time with that community, I realized suddenly that, this is just one part of their traditional lives. There's so much more to explore here. Because I'm a strategy consultant by background, so I'm always interested in kind of analysis.
Yeah.
Once I find the story, I'll then start to really read around it. And as I got into this, I suddenly found, wow, next year is the 70th anniversary of Windrush arriving. Now I've got a hook that will interest viewers, the media, because I'm going to now create a story that no one else has told before about how this generation is living, and I'm going to time it to coincide with the Windrush 70th anniversary.
Yes.
Not knowing at that time, by the way, that this shocking, Windrush citizenship scandal was going to also flare up while I was doing the work, which gave it even more poignancy. And it was almost kind of, a lovely counter story to all the harrowing grimness of, what some people were going through as victims of this crisis. I was able to celebrate this wonderful community and how they led their lives, in South London.
Well, Windrush ended up as, I think, Oxo's most popular exhibition ever, didn't it? I think
it was indeed. Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, we had 15,000 people over 3 weeks. I mean, quite extraordinary.
Yes.
The gallery was packed, and it made me so happy because I'd say to people, and sometimes we'd have 4 generations come at the same time because they wanted to share with their kind of their families.
So they could story tell between each other. Yeah.
And we had these wonderful moments. I'd say, I'm so pleased you're here because this is your story. It's not my story. It's your story. You should be so proud of it. We had total strangers would start talking to each other because they'd suddenly remember something that an image had kind of sort of triggered in their mind.
The Oxo Gallery is obviously a wonderful place to be able to put on an exhibition.
So if you take the Oxo, they've got a group who kind of, review proposals that come in. You have to pay to use it, very clear. It's one of the very few places, in fact, that you can, if they decide they'd like to show your work, then it's one of the few places you can basically put it on. But I would say, I've also exhibited in Clapham, there's a theatre called the Omnibus Theatre. So often you'll find theatres, libraries, churches, would love to stage exhibitions. So you just have to ask. They've often got hanging space, set aside to stage exhibitions, and they often want local stories, whether it be local artists, local sculptors, local photographers. So there is actually, if you look around you, you will find places that will typically not charge you because they regard it as, if you like, a real blessing for them that they can put something on their walls, but it's really worth doing.
And how do you go about the framing of it? I assume that you're taking control of that as well.
Absolutely right. So there's 2 things to that. First thing is that if I'm going to do something in the Oxo Gallery, I'll often, use proper, glazed metal frames, non-reflective glass. And so there's a German company called Halbe, Halbe, which make actually, I think, very good value frames that you can easily rotate work through. So once you've bought a set, you print off the same size print, you can actually rotate the work through it.
Yes, yes.
So sometimes I will use those reusable frames. Other times, actually, I'll just print and then mount on black Foamex without a frame at all or any glass. Yeah. And actually, it's very interesting. It's a very different viewer experience. It feels much more accessible and approachable, in fact. The format is literally just prints mounted on black Foamex. I think you've got to mount them on something to give them a bit of substance and, kind of, reverence. But actually making them, unframed and unglazed makes them feel much more approachable, and people engage in a different way. Once you put a frame and glass on an image, it kind of says, this is important, treat it with respect. Yeah. And at one level, that's kind of what you want as the photographer sometimes. But I've also exhibited Windrush outside without glass frames, and it's a wonderful experience. I love doing it.
Here I am, Mark, the 25th anniversary of women into the Church of England's priesthood, and you obviously are involved with the church, as you were saying at the start. I'm assuming that was another one of those stories that grew out of you showing an interest in one person, and it became something completely different.
It's very interesting, actually, for me, how these stories come about. So what happened there is that the Bishop of Southwark, who first came across my work as a result of the year with my vicar, but then he also, one of the 12 stories in Windrush was called Faith, because the faith of the Jamaican women in particular is incredible. Anyway, so he said, look, I want to find a way to celebrate this anniversary. It's an important anniversary, 25 years. And would you be willing to find a way to do that? So like it was a commission. So back to, sometimes you end up being commissioned. So here I was being paid to do this. By the way, there's a double-edged sword to that, which we can come to if you want to. So he said, can we find a way to celebrate this anniversary? So let's think about it. So anyway, we ended up with the idea that we would choose 12 very different women, whether they be young, old, prison chaplain, hospital chaplain, leafy Surrey village, you name it, wonderful variety. And I would spend time with 12 of them to bring to life, their ministry in an exhibition in the Oxford Gallery, which has been re-exhibited already, to mark this very important milestone in the church's kind of history. And that's how that came about.
The mission in the prison must have been extremely interesting.
That was the highlight for me. At any time when you end up doing a long project, there's always one or two things that just absolutely end up being, truly amazing moments, experiences. I've never been to a prison before, and so I had no idea what to expect. And Susie Simpson, prison chaplain, in the Young Offenders ISIS unit just next to Belmarsh, incredible woman. They call her Mother Susie because for many of them, she is a sort of mother-like figure. She said, okay, come on in. So we spent 2 days, 2 Sundays in the prison, and I'd actually tag along. Because my mindset's always, look, please ignore I'm here. Don't look at the camera. Don't smile. Just do what you're doing, and I'm going to try and capture it with imagery. And the two things things stuck out. Hey, I had no appreciation of the noise in a prison. The noise is incredible. Right. Slamming doors all the time. Yeah. And one of the regulations that I had to agree with going in, just fine, was one, you cannot have any image with the face of a prisoner on or in the image. Secondly, you cannot have any image with either a key or a keyhole in the image. That's quite hard in a prison. Absolutely. Quite hard because, even in the background, they say no. And at the end of each day, I'd have to review all my images with security before I left and delete those with them that were deemed to have basically, crossed the line.
So wait a minute. If there was a keyhole 30, 40 feet away, you still couldn't be in it?
40 feet, I could negotiate my way around that.
Right, okay.
Anything, 5 feet, 10 feet, absolutely no.
Right.
And if even the end of a key, just the tiny end of it, because of course what they're worried about, they're very creative. Yeah. People, they just need to little, and they might be able to create a key. And the interesting thing about their faces is that so many of them they were saying, "Oh yeah, please." Now they knew it was about Mother Susie, celebrate her work. They really wanted to be in it with her. And we'd have to say, look, actually, A, Jim's not allowed to, and B, even though you may feel it's fine, it's not in your interest because these people are most in their 20s, 30s. In 30 years' time, you might regret the fact that you've got an image out there that had you in a prison. So actually, it's in your interest, even though you're offering this. Anyway, so I'd have to be taking images of the size of people's heads and behind them and just seeing enough, if you like, of a profile for the person not to be identifiable, and that would then be okay. I had this amazing moment where Susie was praying with someone who was behind an outdoor kind of netted grill. And if I got into some positions, you couldn't make out his eyes. You could just make out bits of his face. Other positions, his face was in focus. You had to just get very creative to try and find ways to, show that humanity, is in this place, but without showing faces.
What was this double-edged sword then of being commissioned? You must have felt actually this was for once a really nice prospect.
Well, it is nice, but the only thing about being commissioned, of course, is that ultimately you've got a client, and actually, by the way, it was very easy working with Southwark. It's not a problem at all. They were delightful, helpful. But there's just a review process. They need to be satisfied because I like to record interviews to really add depth to the stories. People can read long interviews. So if I'm asking, kind of women, do you feel equal right now in the Church of England? Do you feel support? I wanted to ask some quite difficult questions, and so there was just a need to review everything that was going to be used, and I completely understand that, and I would be in exactly the same position if I were in that place.
I'm glad you mentioned the interviewing. Actually, I know it's something that you do, and I wonder if it brings you, as a photographer. Obviously, you've got one level of closeness, one level of intimacy. As an interviewer, let's call it an interviewer, although, these could be warm chats, it brings you another level of intimacy, doesn't it? And does that bring you closer still?
Yes, no question. I've discovered that the sort of stories I tell, not everyone by any means, but a lot of viewers are interested to know then more about the individuals that I, show in the imagery. And they love to read their stories. And so I now, typically, make a textual narrative a supporting part of the work. You can still enjoy the exhibition just by looking at the imagery if you want to. But if you want to know more about Susie, in the prison, what it's like to be a prison chaplain, what the challenges are, how you came to be doing this, all the sort of things you could imagine wanting to know more about, then you've got the opportunity, if you want to read about them. And there's no question you do get close. You also discover then what's important to them. So if I'm going to tell a story about their ministry, and let's say it suddenly becomes clear that one of these 12 loves, what's called healing ministry, anointing people visiting the hospital, then I need to make sure actually that the part of their story has them in that context, because that's now authentic and makes it very individual to them, as one of the people I'm spending time with. So very often actually, hearing their story, learning about their lives, and I always have a sort of interview guide to whenever I'm going to ask them. That helps me understand, okay, what's important here? What's the story all about? And how do I make sure I now authentically capture that part, to tell their story in a way that's authentic to them, and in this case, their ministry.
It occurs to me that photography is like a big access all areas badge, isn't it? Because you've been to places, talked to people, found out about lives. Let's go right back to just the basics of being invited to take part in a dominoes match that you would not have done otherwise. Yeah,
look, the thing I've learned about this documentary photography is that access is everything. Because if you can't get access, you can't photograph anything,
Absolutely.
Or anything in private places, So, dominoes clubs, kind of 9 nights people's homes, churches, you need to have access. Without access, you can't do it.
Well, Jim, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I've got one last question. What's your curried goat really like?
Delicious. Fantastic. The only thing about curry goat,
It's finding
it
the
makes
goat.
the house smell
does
of
it?
curry goat for quite a few days afterwards, but it
Does it?
tastes fantastic.
It probably makes you feel hungry for at least a week if you can smell it in the kitchen
Indeed,
for a week after.
indeed.
Marvellous. Jim, best of luck with the work as you move ahead and the new projects that no doubt you'll be releasing in the not too distant future as well, when we're all allowed to come out and play again. Good luck as well with the current webinar that you're doing at the Lycra Academy, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you so very much. It's been a real pleasure.
As always, for everything we talk about on the show, we'll have links on the show note page for today's episode. If you'd like to go and see Jim's work, easy website address to remember, it's jimgroverphotography.com.
Photography Daily.
If you're wondering what to listen to for the rest of the week after this FujiCast edition, and you're still hungry for more, then be sure to visit my new podcast, Photography Daily, which drops Monday to Friday at 9 a.m. UK time, 4 a.m. Eastern. Monday to Thursday, inspiring photographers share their stories.
Do I really want to risk my life for getting my stuff printed?
If the images are not beautifully composed, people will just want to turn away from the images.
But I remember the assignment because it was a huge auditorium and there were hundreds and hundreds of people in the room, and all I had was a 35mm.
And the Friday Photo Walk is a longer outing with the show's mailbag as we go on assignment together. Photography Daily, available on all your favourite podcast apps and at photographydaily.show.
Photography Daily.
Right, back to the questions. Oh, keep sending them in, by the way. Very, very important. Click at fujicast.co.uk. Remember, we've come out of doing 3 months of daily shows, so we worked through hundreds of questions. So your input is more important than ever, so it is.
And you can also use the contact us form on the website, which is new and shiny still and has lots of other additional things that you may not have noticed, such as free videos.
I thought you were going to say something such as free drinks.
No, free videos.
Free videos.
So as I scowl the internet, as I go through the internet, I find YouTube documentaries and things like that I put on the website.
I tell you, you're going to be in trouble from oh, look, I can already hear Gemma. She's not very happy about you getting words wrong.
And and I'm actually desperately trying. I've been listening to a lot of Louis Theroux to try and...
Have you? Does that help?
Well, it just makes me feel worse, I suppose. And so free movies, etc., full stop, comma, and a full reference index to all of the shows. All of the interviewees are referenced, and everything else on there, all the links and stuff. So please do go and have a look at it. And you can contact us through there also, of course.
Right, back to the questions. Who have you got?
Martin Signs says, "Hi chaps, looking forward to the world opening up again and going back to photographing professionally in 2038.
Do you think we'll be ready by then? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I may have learned to drive by then again. With this disease, this is his words, not mine. With this disease likely to be around for a little while yet, I'm wondering what we do with the contract. I'm beginning to book on wedding shoots for 2021, and I think I should have a COVID clause.
All right.
I've heard photographers charging couples to move dates, sometimes as much as 50% of the full fee.
50%? What? Unbelievable.
What are your thoughts on that? So, well, 2 points to that, isn't there? So there's the contract clause and then the idea of charging for moving.
Yeah.
I think the COVID clause is interesting. Emily actually asked me something similar offline recently. Emily Renier, a friend of the show.
Yeah.
And I kind of said, I suppose, and the clause was essentially what happens if you give it to them.
Yeah.
Well, if you're photographing a wedding and you give them the dreaded C, can they sue you?
I'd never even thought of that.
Yeah, well, my mind was, that's a little bit like, whilst it's much more unpleasant, it's a little bit like, can you sue somebody for giving you a cold if you're in there?
Can you prove it?
Can you prove it? All that kind of stuff. However, I mean, it's a very valid point because we do live in a much more litigious world these days, and so I probably will have something in there that just says, I don't know, something like COVID aware. Please be aware that should I be on the contact trace list for somebody, then that might affect availability, various things like that. Because that could be it.
Yes, you've got to consider that now.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully by next year, this thing will have off.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Or by 2038, when we eventually get back to photographing.
Anyway, the second point was about couples moving dates and photographers charging 50% just to give them the privilege of moving a date.
I mean, I haven't heard of anybody charging quite that much, but I have heard of people charging money because they say, look, I'm moving my date to a peak date next year, and so therefore that's a date I can't sell anymore. But I'm thinking, well, you've got the business anyway. But what they're trying to do is they don't want to lose their deposit, do they? Essentially, they want to get another deposit.
Well,
because otherwise they would have had a deposit for that date that they no longer can have.
Yeah, but it's more than a deposit, isn't it? It's a full day's work, because let's just say we have a wedding on the 1st of August this year. It's been cancelled, and they move it to the 1st of August next year. So effectively, you're losing 50% business over a 2-year period, because there is no, they're not moving to a Friday next year, and then you can fill that 1st of August date. So there's no, we're bang to rights losing out. Simple as that. However, the approach I've taken with all my clients is the ones that have moved, I've just said, we're all in this together. I really feel sorry for you in your wedding plans. I certainly wouldn't say to them, but you have to pay me 50% as a fee.
Well, take away 50%. What about charging the 200 or 300 quid that I've heard most people have been charging, about 200 or 300 quid for moving a date?
No, I think that personally myself, I think that's wrong. Also, I fully, some people have been asking for 50% of the fee now, and then 50% nearer the time to help the cash flow. That makes sense. I haven't done that, but that does make sense.
Why haven't you done that?
Just because I feel like that they're in the shit just as much as we are. And so, I, as it happens, I'm lucky enough to be able to go to the bank and get a massive, great big off loan.
What you always wanted for Christmas.
That's just what I wanted. What I wanted.
Thanks very much, Mr. Bank Manager.
Headed into my late
You're
40s.
our favourite listener.
You're my favourite debtor. But listen, it's just me, and I have no idea about the financial circumstances of other people. Of course, I do not feel comfortable about penalising the clients though, because they're going to be. I just don't feel comfortable with that. But
there were quite a few wrangles with wedding venues over that, weren't there?
I mean, venues. Some of the venues have been really nasty, haven't they?
That made the BBC News. Some of it, didn't it?
Yeah.
I didn't charge extra. I moved the dates. Along with it went the deposits that had already been paid.
Yeah, same as me.
And that's just the way I've decided to do it. Now, some people, I was in one particular forum, which I subsequently left, where, I got this guy, call yourself a businessman, and I felt like writing about call yourself a human. Because I just felt maybe I was very emotional at the start of it when I made all those decisions, like a lot of people were, but I just felt it was the thing to do.
Yeah. No, I mean...
Karma and all the rest of it.
Now's not the time to feel like being cutthroat about stuff. It's about surviving for both people, both sides, I feel personally. So.
Julia Thorne, hi Kev, hi Neil. I have a question about photo galleries on the website. I have several galleries of my photos of ancient Egyptian artifacts. I had a look at this, by the way, which I quite like that period of history. I'm fascinated. I feel very lucky, exceptionally lucky to have been able to go to Egypt at a time where you were still able to go into the pyramids, because they're closed now. You can't do that anymore. There was the terrorist activity, and that was it. No more. Look at it from afar, but actually going in one, I was quite amazed. I mean, you go through these sort of very tight corridors, and sometimes come into these huge cavernous areas. It's very, very cool in there, as you would expect. There's all those, and you don't try to think about the thousands of tons of stones all around you. It's the sort of place you'd go to, Kev.
Yeah, no, I'd love to do it. Yeah, absolutely.
It was amazing. But anyway, so coming back to Julia, I'm never quite sure the best way to present them. And actually, this could stretch into all kinds of websites, whether you're a portrait photographer, showing Egyptian artifacts or weddings, whatever. How many galleries should I have? I have 9 at the moment, but wonder if that's too many. It's quite a lot, but it depends what you've got to show.
It's quite a lot, but if you've got 9 distinct, different, sets of artifacts to show, then it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, I would say things like that are more about... I don't know if is she trying to sell the artifacts, sell the prints, or is it just a hobby kind of thing?
No, this is really for people to be able to observe and learn.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So then it doesn't really matter, does it? In
No.
terms of that, it's not it's not about attracting people to the website to buy something. So it's more of an educational resource.
So let's look at it as a rounded thing now, and then consider other people as well, like the weddings and the portraits and so on and so forth. Roughly, how many images do you think a gallery should have? Is it a case of less is more? I think you have to be careful. And there's all sorts of technical reasons for that as well. The more you have, the longer it's going to take to load, depending upon how you set the gallery out.
There is that, although Google are working much more along the user experience lines these days, or will be certainly next year. I mean, I actually don't like galleries where it's just pictures.
No?
I have to say, I don't like
text
that.
as well.
I like a story.
Context.
I like context.
Yeah.
I like people to tell me about the images.
Yeah.
So that's what I particularly prefer. But yeah, I mean,
And you've really done this on your new website, haven't you? I'd always had it on mine, with little speech quotes about why you did particular images.
yeah, and I've had it. It's always been like that on mine since my first website years and years ago. I've never had a traditional gallery page.
So you're not a big fan of masonry layouts, which is something that Julia Thorne also asked about.
No. But that's I don't like the way they line up or don't line up mostly and things like that. So yeah, I think that if you are just going to have images, make them as long as they're very easy to get to. Also remember that most people are going to a website, especially if they're interested in Egyptian artifacts and are not photographers or anything like that. They're probably not as web savvy as other people. So clicking on an image and then blowing it up full screen, that's fine, as long as it's very, very, very obvious how to close it and move on. It's amazing how many of these they pop up, and there's a teeny weeny X in the top right hand corner, and you're just like, hang on, what happens next?
Yeah, because that was another one of her questions. Should I use a light box for visitors? So we've sort of answered this as we go along, and I quite like just having a kind of a length of pictures that you scroll down in very much the traditional blog layout.
Most people, the masonry, sorry, not the masonry, the lightbox stuff really has kind of grown with the way that people's screens have got bigger and things like that. Back in the day when people's biggest resolution was 720, then it went to 1080, and now it's much larger than that. So people will be able to see. I don't have mine blowing up, popping up. I'm working on the assumption they're viewing it on either wide on a tablet in horizontal mode or on a computer.
On the phone.
If they're looking on a phone, it makes blowing it up on a phone is pointless because it's just not much bigger. So. Yeah.
Well, anyway, Tar Muchley says, Julia, I know my photos are quite niche. Well, very interesting, actually. I had to look at them. We'll put the website link, actually.
Yeah, we should do. Yeah, definitely.
On the notes today. But any thoughts and advice from the masters would be much appreciated. I don't know when the masters are coming in. I guess maybe later on.
Yeah, I think they came in a bit earlier. Yeah.
They did the lawns.
They've been and gone.
Right, this week's book.
Okay, so we're revisiting Martin Parr this week, and this is a new book for me. Although it's about my homeland. It's called In Wales. Simple title.
That's what it says on the tin.
Martin Parr in Wales.
Yes.
And it's as typical Martin Parr as you can possibly get. So I'm going to randomly pick a page. Another book with no page numbers. So that's difficult for me to explain, but
it's about 2/3 the way through.
It's about 2/3 of the way through. And this is a purple table with a whole bunch of jars of pickled onions. Oh, they look lovely. Just like my dad would make them.
Pickled onions.
Look at that.
Oh,
that's how my dad would do them.
I can eat literally a half jar of them at a sitting.
Yeah.
I do have a problem afterwards.
Don't ever sit next to me afterwards. So, yeah. And then opposite is a Victorian cake, a Victorian sponge cake. Merthyr Tydfil, 1995.
Where the Victoria sponge cake was?
What do you think's on this page? Titled Merthyr Tydfil, 1995.
See, if it was Doogie Wallace, I'd say a couple of people falling out of a club, but no.
Think Martin Parr.
Martin Parr. I'm thinking Martin Parr. What are they going to be? Boom! I've lost.
Baked beans.
Well, that doesn't.
Brilliant.
I was trying to think. I was going to say Welsh cakes, but didn't want to be too cliche.
Brilliant.
You're giving me baked beans.
Abergavenny 2003 is
baked beans.
No mushy peas and faggots. There's a lot of food stuff in here, of course, but
yeah.
then it gets a little bit more contextual. So Pembroke Show 2016, family in one of the kind of kiddies trolleys type things. It's typical. It's so typical Martin Parr. Royal Welsh Show, both Wells. That's when I did my very first judo tournament at that.
Did you?
Yeah, 2018, and typical kind of view of all of the cows being shown in the field and people with bright umbrellas and guy with a hat on and everything. And then so there's a lot of stuff from the Royal Welsh Show, so all of the sheep and the I love pictures like this. Bruce Ingram and Tim Pritchard, Royal Welsh Show winners, both Wells 2018, both desperately trying to hold on to these sheep that are desperately trying to escape with their immaculate white coats on, ribbons and everything. And then of course you have the beach pictures typically towards the end. Llantrisant Male Voice Choir, Working Men's Club, look at that, love it. Canton Liberal Working Men's Club. These are great pictures. You go to places like this, you never take pictures.
Do you know what that you do? It's almost become part of photographers' language, really, because I know I've been out somewhere with a photographer friend and we've looked at something or seen something and one of us has said, I tell you what, there's a Martin Parr just waiting to happen.
Yeah.
It's become part of the language we use as photographers.
But it's something he mentioned when we were on the podcast, when he was on the podcast.
When you interviewed him.
And he was saying that pictures that we take today, the power of them is in the future. And that's something I've often said also. But, he's... To him, it's about, storing, archiving history, I suppose, is the best way to say it. And, it's not, these images are pretty much straight out of camera and, there's no editing of them in terms of, grading or colouring or anything like that. It's proper documentary photography in that sense, I think. Tower Colliery, Glamorgan, 1993.
Let's have a look at that one.
You want to see this one?
Yeah. Oh.
So, dear listener, I should explain that this is three men in the shower.
Not quite what I was expecting.
No, not quite.
Somebody let the chicken in.
Yeah, great. A lot of the colliery stuff all closed down now. But yeah, good stuff. Little book, nice and small.
Available now?
In Wales. Yes.
Yeah, good.
Available now.
Would you get that through the foundation or you just... Yeah.
Well, I buy my Martin Parr stuff through the foundation because if you're a foundation member, you get a discount. Yeah. But obviously, you can get his stuff everywhere. Yeah. This would definitely be on Amazon. I will link to it. Published by the National Museum of Wales.
Superb. Right, photo disaster. Then that's it for the week. Greetings from Toronto. I'd like to share. Do you know what? I've done a terrible thing. I haven't actually got the name on here. Of the person whose this is. Well, you'll have to identify. We'll identify it in the. Oh no, here we are. Pierre Seguin. Pierre Seguin in Canada. Right. Greetings from Toronto. Starting again. I've been meaning to share my photo disaster story. This weekend before last New Year's Day, I was on vacation in Arizona and shooting some landscapes near Phoenix. Vacation, Kev. What's that? Vacation. What word is that? Is that something we used to do?
Yeah, it's something to do with going away with the family or something.
Really?
I can't remember. Yeah.
I was framing a shot of a hole in the rock behind some palm trees reflected in the water when I turned away for a few seconds to reach for some lens tissue to clean a filter. Splash, I heard as my XT20 XF 18-55 Lee 7.5 filter rig and tripod hit the water, left me in confusion, disbelief for a dreadful second before I regained my senses, enough to reach into the near freezing pond to fish it all out. Somehow the tripod had lost its footing, or perhaps I hadn't tightened one of the legs enough. The camera had been hanging off the side of the tripod head to get a portrait orientation because I didn't have an L bracket, you see. Swearing up a storm with the French-Canadian cuss words of my ancestors, I fumbled round with a hex key for the tripod plate that was blocking my battery door so I could remove the battery and the SD card ASAP in my desperate scramble to save my camera. Things looked grim. The lens had water sloshing around inside of it and I didn't have any soft absorbent material handy to start patting it dry. My wife generously donated her cotton t-shirt. What did you think I was going to say? To the cause, and we drove the 20 minutes back to the hotel, also picking up a bag of rice and Ziploc freezer bags. Does that rice trick really work?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, I've done it with a phone before, yeah.
Has it worked?
Yeah.
I wrapped the lens and the body in microfiber, sealed each of them and their own bag of rice to dry, not to be opened again till I returned home. I only noticed then that the filter holder had fallen off the adapter ring and was probably still in the pond with a circular polarizer on it. back to the site of the accident we drove, and thankfully able to retrieve the filter rig. So it all turns out okay in the end, really. And I believe, actually, because he posted his misadventure to FujiX-forum.com, and they managed to clean the whole thing up, I think, in the end. So there we go. But the moral of the story is, don't be putting tripods next to the water without the appropriate kind of brackets that you need. And
Stabilisation.
Yes, you need stabilisation. And that's it. Well, we shall see you next week when undoubtedly I will ask Kev again, what have you got in the diary, Kev? And undoubtedly again he'll say,
not a lot.
Oh, heaven's sake. Right, thank you very much if you're sending in these reviews. Most of all, thank you to the questions that have started. I wanted to stay floating in again. I probably shouldn't say that after the last story. But,
no, don't say that. Yeah.
Thank you to also our guest this week, Jim Grover, and we'll be back next week with more of your club indulgence reviews, and also your emails that you're sending into click@fujicast.co.uk. If you would like to read more about who's been on the show, not just this one, but ones before, and as you say, Kev, what do you say, free videos that you put on there as well?
Yeah, free films.
Free films.
Free stuff, that's all you need to know. The power of free.
Everything's free.
That's free, FREE, not THREE.
All free today. Oh, what was that from? Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Oh, no, that was terrifying.
Yeah.
The child catcher.
Child catcher, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Terrifying.
Yeah. Children. Oh, God, yeah, that brings back horrible memories. So if you'd like to send in your questions, then please do so. It's click@fujicast.co.uk, or you can go via the contact form on the website page, of course. click@fujicast.co.uk. See you next week, Kev.
Bye-bye.
The FujiCast is an independent Loading Zone production. Email the show with your questions and words of wisdom to click@fujicast.co.uk. Email any complaints and political nonsense to our wives, who will deal with your comments in their own good time and in their own good way.